Hi, everybody. I'm Tara O'Hyan, and I'm the Director of Early Childhood here at the Goldberg Early Childhood Center at the Aaron Family JCC in Dallas. I'm really excited to be here with Dave Stanton, who is our Assistant Director, and Crystal Lucha, who is our Pedagogista. And we are really happy to be discussing wonderful things that happen in our classrooms. Today, we're going to give you an idea of development and what happens in each age level. We want you to keep in mind there is a wide range. So when you hear things that we're talking about, know that some children are at different stages of their development in many different areas. Once we know the children well, then we are able to really tailor our education to their specific needs at that time. We are going to share with you what to expect developmentally in your age level, and also how our educators facilitate this learning in our program. Hi, everybody. I'm here with Dave and Crystal, and today we're excited to take a deep dive into our 3-year-old program. And Crystal, I have a question. It seems like there is a really big jump between the 2s and the 3s. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think what happens between that 2 and that 3-year-old age is we kind of exit toddlerhood and we head into preschool age, right? And so it looks a lot different because the children are a little bit more engaged in what's happening in the classroom. And their language has really exploded, so they're able to communicate more about what's happening. So you can ask them about their day and they'll probably give you an answer, versus in a 2-year-old or a toddler classroom, you don't get a lot of that. So their independence is really skyrocketing. They're probably going into the classroom with a little bit more teacher guided experiences that are happening that might look a little bit more of what a parent might expect to be happening in a classroom. So it's actually a really exciting time, a year of like transformation where they're really growing and their friendships are blossoming because they're ready for those kinds of deep relationships. So I think Dave will talk a little bit about what to expect when we're talking about those things.
All right, so let's talk about curriculum and what you would see in the classroom in the 3s. So just the same as we saw in the toddlers and the 2s, children are really going to be building these same literacy skills throughout their whole time here in the preschool. Really, for the most part, the children, even in pre-K, are what we would consider kind of pre-literate, just sort of edging into at the end of pre-K, maybe some literacy skills. And these are the building blocks that they need in order to take off with reading and writing and enjoying those times in the classroom. So what do these skills look like in the 3s? So in the 3s, part of what Crystal talked about was kids really have that exploding vocabulary, and they're putting that to use. So they may have a favorite book that they like to read at home, and they're going to come in and they'll be able to share that story with the teachers and with their friends. They're going to start having more engaging conversations that actually stay on topic for a few exchanges. So you'll see those happening at circle time when a teacher may ask a question about, can you tell us what you did this weekend? And you have the children being able to give an appropriate answer that may go on for a couple of sentences. And they may be able to answer a follow-up question like, oh, how did you get to grandma's house when you went there? And what kind of car did you drive? Or was it a long plane flight? Or those sorts of things, and be able to answer a few follow-up questions and have those multiple exchange conversations. They're also at the point where they can sequence stories and familiar stories. So they're able to use those pictures to be able to retell something that happened. And it could be a story, or it could be like steps for getting ready for bed, right? And you could have, I brush my teeth, I put on my pajamas, I read a book, I take a bath, all those sorts of things. That may be different order in different households, but they're able to share those sorts of things and sequence those types of things. They're also really now starting to understand more of sounds and words and how those things interact. So they can really start to pick out sounds, beginning sounds, ending sounds, They'll do a lot of repeating sounds that you heard, repeating words that are just spoken, because they're starting to play around with language and words more as they're feeling more competent with that. And so they're trying to figure out, how do I incorporate those new words or those new sounds into what I already know? How does that expand my knowledge and the way that I'm able to use language to communicate? In the threes, we're also going from, maybe in the twos, speech that may be intelligible most of the time to adults, but maybe not always to their peers, to in the threes, they're really able to understand what each other is saying. They're able to articulate sounds better. They're able to really enunciate clearly when they're saying some words. And so their speech becomes a lot more understandable. And you're also seeing a lot of things like reciting favorite rhymes and playing around with those types of words and playing around with language. This is also a time where kids will start playing around with rhyming words and manipulating speech and things like that. And so you may have kids singing Down by the Bay, and they're the verses we all know, like, have you ever seen a whale with a polka dot tail? But they may want to change that up a little bit. And have you ever seen a whale racing a snail, or things like that that may rhyme? Or in my household, the song from the 50s, The Name Game, very popular. And they'll take it and they'll put every kid or every object's label through that and do what is it, banana, fana, faux, fave, fee, fi, mo, mave, dave, all that sort of stuff. And that's the type of playing around with language that you're starting to get at this age. You're also starting to see with print awareness that they are reading more often, right? So they will sit there with a book, they will look through it just as if they know the words and are reading them. So they'll open it with the correct orientation. They may even point, just like you may point or the teachers may point to the words as if they're reading. They may even have some of those books memorized where they could be reading it for all an unsuspecting adult knew. They know when to turn the pages. They know what words come next. And that's all part of learning how to read. It doesn't mean they actually could read those words in there, but they're understanding that there are words on the page that mean something. They do commit those favorite ones to memory. You can try always playing that fun game of changing it up on them and seeing if they notice, seeing just how much trouble you can get in as a teacher or a parent if you switch up that familiar language with them. And that's also part of creating that print motivation, so that they're really excited by stories. They're really engaging in books in the classroom. They're able to start answering questions. So opposed to, saying what color is the balloon, and you might have a toddler or 2-year-old that could say blue. You might talk to them about, what did the boy buy at the store? And, oh, he bought a balloon. What color? And you can still ask the what color was, but they're starting to answer slightly more complex questions at this age. They're also starting to understand what goes into creating a book. So there are two distinct things in most children's books. There are the pictures created by the illustrator, obviously, and there's the author who writes the words. And as we'll see when we talk in a minute about writing, like, art and language are still very merged in that putting pencil to paper at this age, and even in pre-K, and understanding that a book and creating writing has both of those things is an important step in the 3-year-old process. Their vocabulary is really starting to explode. So now you're into hundreds of words that they're using. They're putting together sentences that are, I'll say, at least 4 to 6 words, sometimes far beyond that, and that they're increasing in length throughout the year. They're bringing in different tenses, so they're able to start using the past tense for things that happened in the past. And sometimes you may even have a 3-year-old that when they were 2, they said, I bought a strawberry. And now you hear them say, I buyed a strawberry. And we think, as a parent or as a teacher sometimes even, I know you know the word is bought. Like, where did that go? You've been saying that since you were 2. But what they're understanding now is that if I add ed to something, it creates the past tense. And so they're playing along with language and their vocabulary there as well, and the rules of language. So sometimes things may seem like they're taking a step back, but really developmentally they're taking a step forward, because now they're trying to ascertain what are the rules. And as we all know, English is not a language that plays very well by the rules. So there are lots of things that you have to learn. And that bot will come back and replace Bide again, not too long into the future. But that is a developmental stage that we're often seeing for 3-year-olds. They're also, when they see books or when they see people doing things or photos or talking about things, they're able to really name what's happening and what they're seeing. So they know the actions, they know the objects that they're seeing in a picture. You know, if you show them a family picture, they can name who's there and we went to the beach and all of that sort of thing. So for letter knowledge, they're really starting to understand that all these letters have their own sounds and that those sounds will start to go together to form something like words. By the end of the year, so not necessarily at the start, by the end of the year, it's pretty typical that they know almost half of their letters, the uppercase letters, that is. So really the first letters most kids will learn are going to be those uppercase letters. And they'll probably start to know the ones in their name first. They'll know the ones maybe that start their friends' names. They'll know maybe ones in their last names and a few that they see repeatedly over and over and over that are meaningful to them. So those are going to be the letters that a 3-year-old is starting to incorporate. And we see this translate into their writing. So I would still say that art and writing and early writing are the same in the 3s, but you are starting to move into more pre-literate writing and even emergent writing. So what that means in the 3-year-old level is you might get some directional scribbling. And what I mean by that is you have a child and they may draw a picture and they're drawing a picture of their house and their mom and their dad and their brother and their sister, and they've got the whole family there, and they're going to write with a pencil and not pick it up and just have a line that's going left to right and say, this says, this is my family, right? And it does to them, right? That's the next step in writing, is they're understanding there's this long string that goes together to communicate words. That's what they've been learning from reading all of the books for the past 3 years. That's one of the things that they're taking from that there's meaningful messages that come with writing. Now, as they start to move out of that, it's just a scribble, they're going to move towards writing letters. We may see some things that look like, when they're labeling, this is my family, a heart and a horseshoe and an L and a T and an S, and they may be some things that look like letters, but there'll also be some things that look like letter-ish, or maybe they're from a different alphabet than the alphabet that we use. And that's typical. They're trying to start writing letters, and they may even mix some numbers in there, and they're very rarely putting spacing in. But this is their starting point of experimenting with more letter-like formations, because the next stage in writing that we're going to see is long strings of letters getting put together. So you'll see a lot of times the same letters repeating themselves when they do this. So you may have a 3-year-old that goes over, sits down at the writing center, gets a piece of paper out, a pencil, and is there for 5 or 10 minutes, and they're looking at letters that they see on the center right in front of them, and they're writing them, and they're writing very familiar letters. So if I were to take, my son Remy, I might expect him to put a bunch of R's in his words that he's writing, and E's and M's and Y's, and those to be the predominant letters I'm seeing, but he's starting to string them together in different orders as if they were words. Or you'll have a child come over to you, right, and they'll write all those letters down, and they'll say, what does this say? And it says, you kind of turn your head sideways and try to put it together, and it says, right? Because they aren't really writing words yet, but they're experimenting with writing. And you're most often going to see a lot of variation in this. So mostly capital letters, but they may write an M one day correctly, and then even later in the same line, it may be upside down or turned to the side or things like that. This is all starting to play around with that language. And what we're really trying to do in the classroom is encourage them to continue to play around with that language. So instead of saying, actually, we make an M like this, we might provide more opportunities to practice writing and maybe more language in the environment for them to look at and for some of them to start to copy from. So it might be in dramatic play, there is a grocery store and we have a shopping list, and there's going to be a way that they can come over and pretend to write on their shopping list the ingredients that they want to buy at the grocery store. In the threes is also the time you start to see a shift in pencil grip. So it's going to go from more that 2-year-old just holding your pencil down like this to more of a fixed tripod grasp. So not really dynamic that it's shifting yet, but more of a fixed one that's starting to give them some more control over that pencil or crayon or whatever it is that they're using to write. In the threes, just like we're seeing that language explosion, we're also seeing an explosion in math concepts across the board. And this is where that language starts to come in handy across the subject areas, right? That vocabulary is growing, and it's also growing in a way that lets them start to explore more deeply with math concepts, explore more deeply in science, explore more deeply thinking about how they're defining themselves as a person, or how they're answering questions in a book. And so what does that actually look like in the classroom in math? So, at circle time someday, we're not that far removed from all of the harvest festivals and families bringing in pumpkins. So it may be that we bring over some of those pumpkins and we lay them out and we say, let's see if we can count how many, and we count and we do 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're counting sets of 10 or up to 20. And this is about where, you have a lot of 3-year-olds that get to up into those teens, 20-ish sort of age. And that's what we're looking for in the threes. Sorry, not age, number. And that's what we're looking for in the threes. Now, as far as what we would call one-to-one correspondence, so understanding when I touch this pumpkin, it's 1, and I touch the next one, it's 2, and I touch the next one, it's 3 and 4. Now that's a more limited number of 4. Those are 2 separate skills of being able to count and being able to maybe count accurately. And those things are starting to develop in this age. They're also understanding really what counting is. So if we count out all those pumpkins and we brought in 17 pumpkins and we've counted 1 through 17, I know that means the last number we counted, number 17, is how many pumpkins we have. Or if we're counting to make sure we have all our friends at the pool, and I need to see 13 people plus me is 14 and Miss Crystal is 15 and Miss Tara is 16. I understand that ending at 16 means we have 16 friends down at the pool with us today, right? And they're also understanding the concepts of adding and subtracting. They may not be doing a whole lot of them yet or really able to do much in the way of computation, but they understand that those things exist, and that if I have 10 pumpkins and I add 5 to it, that I'm getting more, right? Or if I add 10, or if I have 10 pumpkins and next door doesn't have any and we want to give them 3 of our pumpkins, then I'll have fewer pumpkins in the classroom. So they're starting to understand those concepts. They're also starting to take that shape knowledge that they've developed in the toddlers and 2s and continue to develop it in terms of understanding some attributes of those shapes, and understand that you have 2-dimensional shapes, which they're very familiar with by this point, but also you have 3-dimensional shapes that may have a different label. So you might not have a square anymore, you might have a cube. But they're also able to start taking these shapes and doing things with them. So whether it's with pattern blocks, which are a great thing to get. I know we have holidays that are going on right now, or holidays and birthdays that may be coming up. Pattern blocks are an amazing thing to get at home. They're those little wooden colored shapes, and you'll see our students making wonderful designs with them. They may make something that is just a pattern, right? Has a lot of symmetry. It's a good place to play with symmetry. Or they're starting to put together shapes and say, oh, I've got 2 circles here for wheels and a rectangle here, and that's a car that I just made, right? They're also able to recognize that a rectangle may be a rectangle even if it's somewhat different. And what I mean by that is you might have a really small rectangle and they understand that both that and a really big rectangle are both rectangles, or you might have one that has the longer way horizontally and another that has the longer way vertically, and they can understand that both of those may be the same, that both of those are the same shape. As far as measurement goes, you have them able to recognize big and small and able to also start really experimenting with measurement. So with both non-standard and standard units. And what I mean with that is we might want to figure out just how big our line of pumpkins are. So if we line up our 17 pumpkins on the carpet and we ask all the kids to take off their shoes, and let's see how many shoes can we line up and see how many shoes long is that pumpkin. They understand that's a way of measuring length. We can also introduce things like a ruler and do that, and they're going to understand that's a way of measuring length too. They're not really necessarily going to understand the that those two things are standard and non-standard units maybe, but they're going to understand that they're a tool that they can use to measure. Another thing that kids are starting to make concepts of and measure at this point in time is time itself. So they're understanding that things happened in the past and things happened in the future. Now, something might have happened 6 months ago at their birthday party, and they're still going to tell you about it like it's yesterday. Or that they're going to a big cruise with the family tomorrow, even if that's like 3 weeks from now, but they're starting to associate past and future. And one of the ways that we help them do that is by documenting a lot of what happens in the classroom throughout the week or throughout the weeks, right? And so you may see a calendar that has what they did on Monday, what they did on Tuesday, what they did on Wednesday, what they did on Thursday, and a teacher on Friday can look back and say, look at everything we did this week. We did this, we did that, and they're using that past tense, they're relating that past tense, they're understanding the past, and you may preview what's going to happen on Monday when we come back, or talk about what might you do tomorrow when you're at home on the weekend, sort of thing. All right, with patterns in the threes, you have that sequencing we talked about with literacy. Same thing with patterns, being able to put things in the order in which they occur. And you also have being able to really understand that patterns are something that repeat. So to understand what a pattern is and to start experiment with making them. So they may be doing alternating patterns of white and blue with unifix cubes that are in the manipulative center. They may be seeing if they can work together to line up in a pattern that alternates boy, girl, boy, girl, boy, girl. And towards the end, you may even have some that start to move from that AB pattern into that ABC pattern of maybe they're making a pattern of white, yellow, blue, white, yellow, blue, white, yellow, blue with those unifix cubes. But they're also, they may need some reinforcement and some help. They're able to do that more and get more creative with their patterns with some assistance from educators or from you guys at home. They're also organizing data at this point and starting to record it. So one of the things that goes along with being able to start doing more writing is using that writing for a purpose. So just like creating a shopping list is a purpose, recording data from an experiment or from a survey is a purpose. So if we have a chart that we want to make of who tried the applesauce we made in class today and liked it, and who tried it and thought didn't really like it so much, and we put their names or we put their pictures there, that they're able to record those and they can look and see, okay, more people like the applesauce than didn't like the applesauce. So let's talk for a minute about social and emotional skills. Some of my favorite research statistics come from this area because as much as we prepare for language, and literacy and math, one of the biggest ways that we're getting children ready for when they leave our school, whether that's after the 3-year-old year for some or after pre-K, is through developing their social emotional skills. And there have been numerous studies that show that these skills, including executive functioning, including self-control and ability to regulate, are the key indicators for academic success, not just in elementary school, but all the way through college. And so when we're working with children on developing these skills, it's something that we really value taking the time for, because it's setting them up for a lot of skills that'll help them succeed throughout their lives, right? People talk a lot now about 21st century skills, about being able to work together, having flexible thinking, having creativity, being able to accept feedback, right? Those are all things that we start learning here in preschool. And so what does it look like? What is effortful control? Effortful control is really the ability to have some self-regulation, and it's starting to emerge in this 3-year-old age range. It's not fully developed. Anybody with a 3-year-old at home knows that it's not fully developed, but we're also seeing that they are beginning to have it. So they're able to complete some tasks on their own with some reinforcing. They're able to go and start something independently. You may ask them to go and pick up some toys, or put your dirty clothes in your laundry hamper at home. Or here it might be, go get your lunchbox, put it at the table, and then wash your hands. And they can get partway through that, and then they may forget what they were doing, or they may get sidetracked and need a reminder to do it. And that's totally okay. That's part of starting to develop that ability to self-regulate. They're able to stay focused when distractions are present. And I don't say this in a bad way, but there are always distractions present in preschool, right? I may be really focused on the drawing that I'm making in the art center and trying to write my little sentence about it with my scribbles or with a few things that look like letters. And there's a big car race going on in the block area and a tower came tumbling down. But I'm still able to focus on what I want to do in the writing center. And these next two, I think, are maybe the most important that we really try to work on in the 3s. So remaining calm if goals cannot be reached, right? And helping kids develop strategies to do that, because that's always one of the frustrating things. And one of those strategies is to say, when there is a disappointment, let's see if we can try again. We could try again in the same way. We could try again in a different way. I know that that tower fell over, but what could we do differently when we rebuild it to make it more stable? And those sorts of persistence and that sort of resilience really lead to a lot of successful outcomes later in life. As far as their self-awareness, they're really starting to understand not only themselves, but other people and be able to compare. So they might be able to look at a classmate and say that I'm a boy, but Miss Crystal is a girl and I have no hair and Miss Crystal has long hair. They're also starting to be able to separate some from adults, both from you as a parent and from us as a teacher, and be able to be more independent and come up with their own plans to do things and try to execute those own plans. Now, granted, they may need our support during center time if they've gone and they're exploring the light table and what happens when they mix colors on top of the light table and how does that look, or they may need our support when they go over and are working on a 24-piece puzzle and can't quite get this piece to fit because they haven't figured, they know it goes there, but they have it turned backwards and can't figure out how to rotate it. And they'll come to us for help then, or they'll express that they're frustrated and we can come over and talk them through those moments and help them solve that problem. But they're starting to do those things on their own as opposed to needing teachers or us as parents to facilitate those. They're also really more focused on feelings at this age. So they recognize the feelings and the emotions of other people, and they can put that language and that growing vocabulary to it to describe it. So they might say that, oh, Mr. Dave is really sad today. He was over in the corner crying because he misses mommy and daddy, and I'm gonna bring him a tissue so he can blow his nose, and then maybe we can go play together, sort of thing. So you might see that sort of stuff happening in one of our 3-year-old classrooms. And if we think about problem solving, right, that's one of the biggest things that we know that our children are going to need in life. And at this age, they can figure out that there's a problem and they can try to come up with some solutions. They may need some help and they may have a few solutions that they become familiar with, a few strategies to solve problems that they can incorporate with that repetition, but they're trying to come up with a solution to problems that they identify. The other thing that you're going to see there is they defend their possessions. And why I think that that's a big one is the 3-year-old age is really the age where I think you start, as they're 3 turning 4, moving from parallel play to really more cooperative play and associative play. So it overlaps a little bit with cooperation, but a lot of times the play we may see at the start of the year in the 3s is the children are doing the exact same thing with the exact same materials next to each other, but they're not really engaging in a back and forth. One of the really cool things about the 3s or the start of the 4s is you start to see that engagement back and forth and that talking about creating rules for the game. And if I do this, you do that, and that negotiation sort of thing. And that just starts to emerge here, but we're still seeing the end of that sort of parallel play. And so you will see some of that negotiation over kids that are really defending the possessions. And then that's where it's our job as educators to step in and say, I see Billy really wants the shovel that you're using in the sandbox. Could he have it turn when you're done? Right. And so, and Johnny says yes, and Billy says thank you. And we stay and make sure that that happens. Right. And we work through that. You're also going to see, as Crystal mentioned, this is starting to look a little more like a classroom in a more maybe what we have traditional conventional sense than some of the toddler and 2-year-olds may have. And you have. So at this age, we're also going to see children working cooperatively, not just with each other as they're growing those problem solving skills and sharing toys and playing together and moving from parallel to associative play, but we're also going to see them working cooperatively in small groups. And so you're going to see that picture we have sometimes in our classroom of those 3 or 4 kids with an educator working on an experience. And these kids have been really interested in pumpkins, and we've cut open pumpkins and looked inside. And one of them noticed, man, that pumpkin that we tried to cut open, I tried to pick it up and it was really heavy. And so we wanted to figure out just how heavy is it? And so thinking about measurement, like these kids are going to use a scale or a balance and put the pumpkin on one side, and let's see if we can grab some rocks, or let's see if we can grab some marbles and balance it out on the other side. And how many does it take? And they're going to work together. And what we're looking to see in this age is that they're really able to kind of sustain that attention for maybe 5, 10, 15 minutes when they're working together on a task that they're interested in. Right, that they've helped identify. We've figured out how do we make the math and language connections, and then we can write and maybe practice writing or give them an opportunity to write 15 for how many rocks it took to balance out the weight of the pumpkin. And their 15 is probably not going to look like our 15, but again, they're trying to document and record their observations. Lastly, I want to talk some about identifying and expressing emotions. So that vocabulary with the feeling words is really useful now, because children can identify to start saying, I feel mad, or I felt mad. They're starting to be able to control their temper and verbalize that, instead of, if they're mad, maybe just going and pushing or shoving. That still happens, right? That doesn't go away. Sometimes we get too frustrated to be able to do that initially, but we're starting to take steps in that direction of self-control, where we can put our feeling words into expressing ourselves and not have to use our body to physically communicate how we're feeling. Okay? And that they can express their range of emotions from sad to happy and nervous might be a little bit more pre-K, but you know, you could talk some about being frustrated, or you could talk some about being excited, or you could talk some about being calm. And I gotta tell you, one of the really cool things, and if you've never seen our library, you should come and check it out sometime. In our library is we have so many books that teachers pull into circle time to read to help kids learn these words. We have puppets to help them express these things and be able to use them to act out and say, this one's feeling this way and that one's feeling that way. And what do you think we could do to help them feel better, right? And that helps them recognize the feelings and emotions, both in themselves and also in others. And when they're recognizing them in others and saying that, oh, Crystal's mad that I took her toy away, that's when the teacher can come over and really help facilitate that conversation of how do we respond to that? How do I respond to Crystal being mad? It might be that somebody has to come over and says, Dave, I see that Crystal's really mad. She's going with her face right now. Do you think we could give her the toy back and you could ask for a turn when she's done? Right. And so we're still using a lot of that language, but they're able to start recognizing that and responding to it with support from their teachers. So that's really a lot of what it looks like in our 3-year-old classrooms.
Well, Dave, that's great information. There's so much that's happening in a 3-year-old classroom. And I think sometimes as parents are not spending much time in the classrooms, you know, you peek into the classroom and you see them playing, you see them having a great time, but you don't necessarily know everything that's happening, all the things that you just shared with us. So can you talk about what communication parents should be receiving from the teachers to help them to see what's going on in the classroom?
Sure. And I think that's a good point, Tara. A lot of times play is that academic learning at this age, right? That some of it is how you frame it. So we could just leave kids with their own devices to explore the pumpkins. And, you know, they might roll them around, they might smash a few open, see what's inside. That's exciting. But it's up to us to kind of guide that in a way that also brings in how can math and how can language and how can science be meaningful to help us understand more? Because children are really trying to build their understanding of the world. And so I think that's the communication that you want to look for in Story Park. And those are the types of questions to talk about with your teachers at conferences, that it's going to take some of those moments and it's going to kind of contextualize what is the learning that's really happening. Like, why was it important for us to share this moment of somebody exploring scale, and how is that balancing out? Are they understanding that more means it's going to go down and it's heavier, and fewer of the same object means it's going to go up? Like, what concepts are they creating through this exploration where, yes, there's play, but it's guided play, right? And it's experimenting. And really, when we think about it, a lot of the learning that's happening is children experimenting, coming up with a theory that, oh, this is going to happen if I do it. And if it doesn't, trying to figure out why. So one of the things that we want to do is embrace that, take their interest, take the questions they're asking themselves, and then go ahead and bring in that academic frame for it and share with you how that development is happening and how that academic growth is happening through the play.
Great, thank you. I want to thank all of you for watching this and taking a deeper dive into the threes with us. We're very lucky to have Crystal and Dave on our staff who are really experts in curriculum and development and all of that. And I do know that they are open to continuing the conversation, looking at other things in different ways. So please reach out to any of us. Crystal and Dave specifically love talking shop, so they're happy to do it at any time. And thank you all for joining us to learn about the threes. Bye.